This time up, we're going to have a look at how this new Fluid engine has changed, how we approach using summary blocks in Squarespace, and if you've seen videos before, you'll know that's one of my favorite features. Okay, we're back on our demo website and let's crack on. So I'm going to click Edit, jump in. I might well add a new section here. So what I'm going to do first is just change the background color of this section so we can differentiate them. There we go. Hover over Done, press Save top left hand corner, and that section that we edited and created in the previous chapter, and if you're jumping in at this stage, I'd recommend going back and rewatching that one or watching that one for the first time. And we're going to add a new blank section once again. But before we do that, let's take a minute just to have a look at some of the templates that are available. For the eagle-eyed amongst you, you'll know that there have been a few changes. And we can see some of the overlapping text effects here weren't in the previous templates. We've even got some scrolling text options as well. I would just proceed with caution when we start using more elaborate effects, simply because that unless it's ingrained in your design process, unless it's an effect that you deliberately want to create, you are going to tie yourself up in knots by trying to go after too many shiny things. With design, it's about discipline, keeping it simple, making sure that the effect that we add in has a true purpose as part of our project. Okay, I know I'm sounding like a buzzkill right now, but that's the advice that I'm always trying to drum in when we're training designers, is making sure there's a purpose for everything we do. Enough of that. Let's get back to summary blocks. So I'm going to add in a blank section, and we can see our new section in place. I can use these arrows to move it down, and then we've got a blank section below our previously created area. The one difference here is when we add a blank section, as per the previous classic editor, I'm going to call it, we don't have a text box to start with. So we have to add in our first block. I'm also looking up to see if there's a keyboard shortcut for adding blocks. There must be, because otherwise this is very monotonous to go back and forth to add sections in this way. I'm going to add a text block to start with, which will be our introduction. As shown in the last video, we can see that this width is smaller, whilst by default it used to be that. That would be our text block area. Let's put in a couple of paragraphs of introductory text. I'm going to select this first paragraph and just make the font larger. That's way too much text for that size of heading. So let's just trim it down a little bit. And even drop it down to a 2-line introduction. So the one thing that you may or may not know of is to create a line break in Squarespace. We hold down Shift and press Enter, and then that will create a line break within that heading. Okay. And we might even go with an effect. So we have our first title in bold, our second part of the same title in standard font size. Okay, that's a little bit of formatting. What I'd like to try and do now is to add a summary block in that breaks outside of the grid, but only on one side. So if you watched the last video once again, you'll know that I've already hinted at I wanted to do that. So I'm going to add in summary block. I think it's moved now. And we're going to just drag it over to the position that we want. So we can see all these semi-transparent boxes in the background to give you an idea of the grid. I think 2 of these. Yeah. So just doing a little bit of rough maths in my head. It's early on a Saturday morning. I don't really want to be doing that. But we can see that there are 2 of these grid blocks to fit the 12-column grid. So previously in Squarespace, it snapped almost rigidly to the 12-column grid. That's where we have 12 dynamic grid columns that will adjust depending on the size of the screen. The gutter size, the space in between each of those, would always be 20 pixels. I believe we're looking at either 10 or 20 here as well. We don't need to know too much about that other than it did make it more challenging when we wanted to put 5 items per row, because 5 does not go into 12. Even me on a Saturday morning with my level of maths can work that one out. Okay, so our summary block's in place and we've got it flowing over to the right and fixing with the column on the left. So the text and the start of the summary block I want to be in line. I think this is a feature that's been used quite heavily on a lot of modern designs. I'm pretty sure even Apple used that. I'm probably wrong here now, but let's have a quick look. Okay. I'm sure I saw the effect used by Apple. It must have been something else. But one thing we can see from looking at the Apple side is the fluidity of these designs. The fact that we're going away from rigid column structures is something that's becoming universally adopted as a web design trend. So this type of overlapping images with text fitting on each side are really easy to do now with the new Fluid Editor in Squarespace. We'll try that in the next chapter. Okay, so we've got a summary block here. We need some content first, so I'll just see what the demo content is like for the blog. Okay, it doesn't seem to have any images for that. So I'm going to go with episodes because that would be a better fit in terms of having both images and titles. These images at the moment are in portrait format, which could work quite nicely. But if I jump back now and there we go. I want 7 or maybe even 8 items. I'll put it up to 9. So there's a maximum of 9 items in total. And I'm going to switch it to a carousel summary block. And you can start seeing what I want to do here. I quite like the vertical format of the images, but the problem we've got here when we go with 3 per row is it's taking up too much of this vertical retail space, meaning that we're not seeing the content and the image on the screen at the same time on a smaller resolution screen. So we've got a couple of different options here. We could change the ratio to something like square, and that would work. Or we could drop it back to the vertical format and maybe go with 4 items per row. And then maybe jump it up then to a multiple of 4. So let's go with 12 maximum. So the moment we have more than 12 items, it'll show the first 12 in the summary block and 4 items per row, meaning that for the more pedantic among you, I include myself in that bracket, it means we get 3 rows of 4 being complete. I'm going to get rid of that featured section because I always like to have my own title feeding into that. So again, we'll add a new block and we'll squeeze it in amongst the 2. So you can see it's overlapping. This is going to be quite jarring for those who are used to the current Squarespace, or the old, should I say, Squarespace interface. I'm just going to reduce the height. It doesn't let me. There must be a minimum height. Try it the other way. Move the bottom up. Nope. It will not allow me. So by going with heading 2, we're kind of fighting for priority with this main heading above. So this is where I might just change that to a heading 3. With our headings, we like to cascade in. So we go in with the largest font at the top. So the introductory title, which would be in this section, would generally be that, where you'd use a heading 1 once per page. Then we go into heading 2, which we can use multiple times, as shown here. And then within that section, which these episodes would be part of this introductory text, Okay, it's Latin. It doesn't make sense in this current setup, but I suppose go with me on that. This is where we reduce the size of font for each heading in from heading 1. And then we've got a smaller font then for the titles for each of the posts. So that's got a nice flow to it in terms of the user being able to follow which sections kind of fit within each areas. That's another thing of using this colored banding background really helps with that as well. Okay, so that is all in place. Hover over done, press save, and let's just take a look at this new summary block section using the Fluid engine. Okay, in desktop, it's working nicely. The other thing I might do is just bring it in a little bit, or I could add a bit of custom code to bring these arrows in so that they're not right over on the edge. But this really nice new effect of having this offset summary block is something we're definitely going to be using as part of our designs. Now, moment of truth. Does it flow on mobile view? Didn't crash this time. That's promising. Okay, so we've got our section there, and wow, that's almost perfect, apart from the title is below the summary block. So a little bit of editing here. This is where it crashed last time, actually, was when I went in to edit it in mobile view. Let's move the episodes above the summary block itself. One thing we found last time is when we're editing in mobile view, it doesn't affect the desktop, or at least it didn't last time, and it hasn't this time as well. Fabulous. I'm really starting to warm to this Squarespace Fluid engine. See you next time.